Joining me here on set with our continuing coverage of Tropical Storm Harvey, Caitlin Huey-Burns. She's a reporter for Real Clear Politics and a CBSN political contributor. Also joining us, Ed O'Keefe in Washington. He's a Washington Post congressional reporter and CBS News political contributor. And Leslie Sanchez, she's on the phone from Sugar Land, Texas, a CBSN political contributor and also a longtime Houston resident. Caitlin, I want to start with you on set. We heard the president say, we want to do this better than ever before, talking particularly about how he wants this in 5 years to be looked at and said, this is how they did it right. It's not clear if he's going to be meeting with evacuees or victims of this hurricane. What do you think the goal is?
Well, here the goal is to show that he is concerned and is near the site, right, 200 miles away, of course, but not wanting to distract from the efforts that are at the center of the zone. What is interesting here through a political lens is that this is a huge test for this president. Presidents, as we know, have to deal with disasters like this that they do not expect, and how they deal with them could in many ways define their presidencies. You heard you heard earlier this frame of reference referring to this is not the Superdome. That is referring to the way that Louisiana, which is the Katrina 12th anniversary today. So the president is also tasked with showing empathy here. He has been criticized for not really doing that in times of crisis, and I think a lot of eyes are looking to him to see how he acts as a leader through this particular crisis, and whether he is actually able to show that kind of consoler-in-chief, empathetic president that others have been able to.
To Ed O'Keefe, Ed, who can forget that image of President Bush that was long criticized, President George W. Bush looking out of the helicopter of Air Force One as he's looking down at the damage on Katrina. What do you think the concerns are for the president as he heads to the scene, and the fact that how can you be consoler-in-chief if you're not meeting with evacuees or victims on the ground?
Yeah, it's going to be tricky. Look, this is a president in desperate need of a good photo op, and I think they're certainly hoping that today goes relatively error-free. The fact that he's 200 miles south in Corpus Christi and then going around the storm up to Austin for a more detailed briefing will give them images of him showing concern and getting updated by local officials. But you're right, unless there is some kind of more direct interaction with folks, and maybe it'll happen outside this fire station in Corpus Christi, maybe it'll happen in some other way in Austin or over the weekend, the ability to demonstrate his compassion, if he wants to, will be tricky unless he's able to see you know, people who have been removed by this. And look, this is a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. You either stay away and you're seen as being too remote and distant from it. You get in there and you potentially divert resources or make it tricky for local authorities to respond, and you're going to get accused of taking advantage of the situation. So this seems to be, at least in its early hours here, a good chance for him to come, get an update, vow to come back. But he set the bar high. I think it's notable he says that there, that we're going to do this better than we've ever done it before, and in 5 years you'll be able to look back and say this went well. That's a high bar to meet at a time when you're now dealing with a natural disaster that federal authorities had never contemplated, never rehearsed for, and have not seen before. Major urban flooding on a wide scale across the fourth largest city. And I think it's notable that Brock Long, the FEMA administrator, who used to deal specifically with hurricane response for FEMA in the southern region of the country, and who then served as Alabama's State Emergency Management Director, and now is running the agency, very quickly went out there and said, this is not the Superdome. It's not. There hasn't been mass hysteria at the main evacuation center and in the streets of Houston yet. But again, to say that and not know how the next few days unfold is a risky bet.
Yeah, there's still so much left to figure out with the conditions on the ground. A second landfall expected in the next 24 hours likely. I want to turn to Leslie Sanchez. Leslie, you're in Texas. You were evacuated. Give us an update on you and your family first off, and give us a sense of what it's like being an evacuee.
Sure. We're in Sugar Land, Texas right now, which is a voluntary evacuation area. We're basically watching the levees and the rise of the Brazos River. That is, we know that flooding is imminent, and the river flooding hasn't even started yet. That's really the phase. But the communities I've been in, I was next door in Sienna Plantation, mandatory evacuation. people trying to get out. I'm posting photos on Instagram and Facebook that basically you can't get out. The route that you were encouraged to do so on LJ Parkway is now flooded. So you have a lot of families scrambling, trying to, A, get out of the neighborhood, and B, figure out where to go, because the shelters are at capacity, and they're opening new shelters, but it's hard to disseminate that information. But I will say something about the president's thing. Ed and Caitlin are exactly right, because you're setting the bar so high to say things are going well. People are being evacuated on air mattresses or on a shrimp pontoon boat, just driving through what is now a neighborhood that looks like a river or the Mississippi. And you're jumping into a public service, public works truck being taken to a destination you have no idea. So this is not going well. People are on, there's a giant flamingo floating device, and you have children being pulled out of a neighborhood. This is not going well. And yes, the federal resources are getting here, and we're 3 days into this. We're just now starting to see the National Guard, but it takes time to get organized, and it's been Texans taking care of Texans, Louisianans coming over to take care of Texans, anybody who's nearby and was able to get here on a boat. So the bar is extraordinarily high, because right now there's tremendous stress and frustration for these communities.
Leslie, I remember covering President Obama and being on the ground with him during the tornadoes in Moore, Oklahoma, and it meant so much to the people on the ground, even though they weren't able to shake his hand, physically meet him, that the President of the United States came to a disaster area. Do you get that sense in Texas that people are happy that the President is there?
Right now, it's too early to tell. Rena, I think in Corpus Christi, being from Corpus, there's a tremendous level of support anytime the president shows up and shows that he's there to give guidance and support and draw national attention to what they're feeling and their personal devastation. That's always clearly a powerful image and message. I think it was a correct decision not to come to Houston. It is such a critical situation in terms of water rescues. By the second right now, there's thousands of people being rescued at this moment, and every resource is completely stretched, which is why you have individuals buying rafts, taking whatever they have to share food and rescue people. So it is not a time to handle an entourage of that magnitude, but it will remain to be seen. I will tell you, Senator Cruz has been here at the George R. Brown Convention Center, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, certainly the mayor, and I think it was well received. They're very personal. It's very private messages for the people in these shelters, and that, I think, will serve the community well.
I want to turn to Caitlin. Caitlin, we also saw there the senators of Texas, John Cornyn, Ted Cruz, on the ground there with the president. Ted Cruz, somewhat tumultuous relationship with the president. Cornyn, he's the whip. He's got to get out there, get those votes to get the funding, and it's very personal for him. What are you hearing about as far as disaster relief funding from Congress?
Well, this just, again, adds to the plate that Congress already has to deal with. Remember, before the storm hit, they were going to have to contend with a budget showdown. The president had demanded funding for a border wall or else shut down the government. Yesterday, the president said that those things are separate, that he wants this funding, and he promised in that press conference that that relief would be pushed through Congress. And it is up to these lawmakers to push through. There is a sense, of course, that that the immediate relief is necessary. This also threatens to, push back lots of things that Congress needs to do on other fronts. But you did see Cornyn and of course Senator Cruz there. Senator Cruz has been under fire from other colleagues from New York and New Jersey for not approving disaster funding after Hurricane Sandy. He has argued that he supported one measure of the bill and another bill he did not support. So this is a complicated issue for a lot of folks who are not in these disaster zones, concerned about paying for these kinds of measures. But the overall atmosphere, I think, changes some hearts and minds in terms of disaster relief. I know Ed and I, having covered Congress, have seen that before.
Ed, I want to ask you about the fact that this isn't the only thing on the president's plate right now. He's got North Korea. He's also got ties about Russia during the campaign and his businesses. He's also got the debt ceiling deadline coming up. It's a lot for one president to juggle. This is enough, but there's a great deal of other things. What do you make of the fact that there's still so much pending and getting through, and he's got to maneuver these waters?
I put together a to-do list for Congress in the next month, Rena, last night, that listed about 18 big items, most of them that have to be completed by September 30th. It's going to be a heck of a month, one of the most treacherous I think Washington has seen in a while, because in essence a bunch of homework assignments are coming due and they haven't gotten started on them yet. And if anyone remembers what it was like crashing from midterm exams or term papers at the end of a semester, that's essentially what Congress faces. And on top of that, now you have these disasters. For example, the flood insurance program, that's on the list. It may have ranked number 15 or 16 on it. It's now jumped up to like number 3 because they're going to very quickly here exhaust their borrowing authority and going to need more money. Same goes for that spending bill, because as part of that spending bill now, which is also set to or needs to be passed by October 1st, you got to come up now with billions more dollars to pay for the relief that's going to be needed in Texas. And some estimates this morning from lawmakers in Texas is that it's going to hit at least $150 billion, which will exceed the damages from Superstorm Sandy, exceed the damages from Katrina. So not only are we seeing records broken when it comes to rainfall, but you're probably going to see records broken in terms of price. And that'll be really tricky for a Republican Party that has said in the past that when you do these massive spending programs, you got to find spending cuts. Most of the people who have been calling for those cuts happen to be Texas lawmakers. So it'll be interesting to see how they deal with that. And yes, the president has to deal, of course, with North Korea as well, which is a significant threat and ongoing. I mean, frankly, he could be back here in Washington hosting a Situation Room briefing on that in addition to this, because arguably they're just as urgent and important tasks for him to deal with. One other point, though, regarding congressional debate. I talked this morning with Congressman Philemon Vela, who covers the southern tip of Texas, an area that's been pretty much spared from this, and he's a Democrat. I said, look, you probably have heard your colleagues out east or across the country kind of pointing out the potential hypocrisy here of a lot of Texas lawmakers who may have voted against this kind of disaster aid in the past and might want to make hay of it now, especially in the Democratic Party. And he said, look, don't do that. He said, you know, this is more serious, and Congress needs to move quickly. And he was calling essentially on his own fellow Democrats to not make hay of this because it's just too serious a situation, obviously costly and deadly. And he thinks there's just no room for political gamesmanship when it comes to this. And
the images are really matching exactly that very tale. Leslie, you say that the president has already proposed cuts to FEMA and roll back protections for infrastructure flooding. Do you think that that'll come back to haunt him?
Rena, the reality is it probably will. This is a situation where you have a lot of people, even within the agency in FEMA, that have not been confirmed. It has been very difficult to get people through because the president has micromanaged a lot of those hiring of those positions. So there's going to be criticism. I think it remains to be seen only because it's so soon and it's hard to see how we're going to come out on the other side. If things are managed now and enough resources get there and FEMA can respond in an effective way, I know that the individuals from housing and urban development are here on the ground. You have some Texans that happen to already be here that are on the ground. There were individuals from the VA who happened to be here for a conference that were already on the ground, and they're volunteering. So they're out in the in the field offices. I think there's been an immediate rapid response, but from the political engagement, getting people confirmed, and having leadership and management, it's a really shallow crew in there.
Leslie, we hope you stay safe. Please send our love to your mom as well and keep us posted on your whereabouts. I want to thank Caitlin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe for joining us as well.